So welcome to the panel discussion on strategies for getting into technical writing. Our presenters today are Jacob Berger, Julie Stickler, Samantha Gidlow, Sara Thomas, Sangeeta, Raghu-Punnadi, Lavanya, Mandavilli, Dana Brown, and Kevin Owen. They will be talking about their diverse backgrounds and share advice on how to network, build portfolios, market writing and technical skills, and how to get a technical writing job. So feel free to ask any questions you might have, and thank you so much to our presenters.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, everybody. We are really excited to be here at SpeedCon, and this is how we're going to start. So we have a panel, and each one of us has some tips and pointers for you. So we'll go around the room. All the panelists will give you some suggestions, and as we are talking, if you have questions, you could add them in the Q&A or unmute yourself and ask once the panel is done. So I'm Sangeeta, and I'm going to walk you through the basics of tech writing. So what exactly is technical writing all about? What are the skill sets that you need? And when you go into an interview, what is that organization or the interviewer looking out for? So for me, technical writing is a blend of technology and language. It's about creating those technically accurate documents which are easy to read, easy to consume by our end users. So it's about folks who are very passionate about technology and also about language. And this combination, you don't find it in any other field. It's either technology or language, but we blend in those two. So the next question that naturally comes up is, how much technology skills do I need to have and how much of language skills do I need? So we'll begin by understanding technology first. We all know there are numerous technologies available and they are used by various organizations. So we cannot master them all. That's a given. So how do we go about it? So what we do is we research about that because we are passionate about technology. We can research, we can analyze, we can self-learn. The World Wide Web, the internet, is like an encyclopedia. You can find out anything about anything on the internet. You've got courses on the internet. So if you want to learn something, there's no shortage of resources. So you don't have to be hung on what technology do I need to know before I get into the technical writing domain, right? So the analogy that I go with is that you can be a jack of all trades. That means you know the basics of the technology and eventually you master it on the job. So you begin, you self-learn, you research, and you reach that level where you become a master. So when you're applying for jobs, do not hold back just because you think you don't know much about that technology. You always have the option of going and learning about it, exploring more about it, right? So when you go into an interview, you just have to convince the interviewer that you are a curious person, you are happy to learn, you can self-learn most importantly, and write about that technology. How can you do that? All of you must have done some project in your university or school. Use that project to showcase how you research for that particular technology or how did you go about that project. What skills did you use? How did you self-learn? How did you improve your skill set? So that's one way to go about it. When you're going for an interview or when you're applying for a job, one tip is always look at the company website. It's going to tell you about the products of that organization. It's also going to tell you what technology they use, and it will also give you an insight on what type of documentation they create. How does this help? Two ways. During the interview, there will be questions, direct or indirect, around that particular technology or a product. So you're already a step ahead because you went and researched about it. Second, at the end of an interview, the candidate is always allowed to ask some questions. So here you can prove yourself. You can get those extra brownie points by asking relevant, good technical questions so that the interviewer knows that you went, looked at the organization, understood their products, and are interested in the job. So first advice, don't be too bothered about technology. We all are really good learners. we can pick it up. Language skills. How much language skill do I need? We are in this room because we have a flair for writing. We are language experts, right? The only thing that we need to do is blend the two together. So if you can write simple grammar, English sentences, make the technology simple enough for your users to consume, you're good to go. I mean, the previous session by Mukta on minimalism is something that we sort of practice, right? Writing clear, concise documentation. So when you go out there, explore the job market, look at the technology, research, learn about it, go ahead, apply for the job. And if you feel that this technology is not for me, since we begin as a jack in the trade, you can switch domains easily. It's not so difficult. So my advice, go out there, don't be scared. And I'm going to hand it over to Sara for the next points. Thank you, everybody. Sara, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Okay, sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Sara Thomas, and I'm a writer at Red Hat. And so I just want to continue on what Sangeeta was saying and talk a little bit about just getting started writing and building your network. So like Sangeeta was saying, we're all in this room because we have a flair for writing. We are curious and passionate about learning new things, probably pretty proficient at researching. So I just wanted to share a little anecdote about myself. When I was an undergrad, I was always just kind of drawn to like pursuing these passions that I had. I always just loved reading, writing, and learning. And it always seemed a little vague to me, but I just liked my English classes and I loved philosophy. And that was just my thing, and I liked doing it. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna go to law school. But as my undergrad career progressed, I kept thinking to myself, I don't really know if this is like the path that I want to take these passions. I felt maybe like doing something like this may even kind of like burn out my passion in some way. So I began kind of thinking about maybe doing some kind of professional writing. I kind of honed in on an experience I had as a legal clerk where I found myself just asking for lots of tasks where I was going to be doing researching and writing, and I enjoyed doing that kind of thing. So I just kind of really leaned into my passions when I was talking to my undergraduate advisors, like, what do I want to do? Like, I want to write. That's what I want to do. And I had to really like kind of say to myself, like, hey, like, I think I'm a writer, and it was sort of this kind of epiphany moment that I had late in my undergrad where I kind of just had to keep repeating to myself, like, I'm a writer. And so, once you kind of decide that in yourself, like, yeah, I want to be a writer. I am a writer. What do you do from there? And I think, like I said, one thing you can do is like in any job that you have, like volunteer your writing services. Say like, hey, I'm doing this one thing, but I'm really good at writing and organizing things. And I noticed that we need this here where we're working. So can I just like try to do it, like take it on? So, that's one way that I got started professionally, being a professional writer. I didn't have like a title that I was a technical writer. I just started writing. Yeah, but I do think once I kind of decided that's what I wanted to do, then I sort of like started building my network, and I wanted to meet more people who were writers. And it was super helpful and so inspiring to meet people like me who had these same kind of passions and niche interests, and were from all different kinds of backgrounds. So it's I would strongly suggest that, once you decide in yourself, like, I'm a writer, I want to be a writer, look for ways to extend your network of people who are writers, and be inspired by them and encouraged by them. And I would say a great way to do that is through paid courses. And, keep in mind, you're paying for the knowledge, and you're paying, for connections too. You're paying for the environment where you're able to, collude, for lack of a better word, with people like you. So I think it's an invaluable thing to, take some classes and also attend free meetups in the area where there's local professionals, like-minded professionals. Building your network in the area can just kind of help you like identify things that you didn't know about that you want to learn about, and kind of just expands your horizons as a professional, and just really solidifies like that voice in yourself. Like, I am a writer. Here are all my, like nerdy writer friends, and we're all super cool in our own way. So that's all I really had to say about networking and just like getting started writing. Just do it. You're good at it. You know it. You're here because of it. Just keep saying to yourself, I'm a writer, and go out there and write, because there's a lot of need for people who can write and organize their thoughts well. So that's all. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague and talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, guys. I am Samantha Gidlow, and I am a senior writer at Red Hat. So my undergraduate degree was in sociology, and then I later did my MBA. So I am definitely not a traditional technical writing background whatsoever. So I'm kind of here to talk to you guys about like building your portfolio. So oftentimes during interviews, or even before an interview, you might be asked to submit some work samples or a writing portfolio. Now that might be something tough to do if you've actually haven't done anything like in terms of work experience or internships where you might have contributed to actual customer documentation. So one of the ways that we've kind of talked about it is contributing to like GitHub projects or open source documentation. You might be learning something new where it's, like you might be learning like a programming language or something like that, and you might see discrepancies or even gaps in the documentation. Go ahead and get to typing and make those suggestions on GitHub. And then if they actually accept it into their formal documentation, you now have one piece that you can add to your portfolio. This is a really good way to build a portfolio, and also a really good way to contribute to the open source community, and GitHub is now kind of a thing that people tend to look at. So it's really good to see that, you have a presence on GitHub. Participating in Google's season of docs, which is actually going to be coming up soon, and we provided a link to that in our resources slides. Google's season of docs is really open to anyone who wants to help like with open source organizations, and a lot of times like nonprofits write some or all of their documentation. So past year I participated in the Google season of docs and was selected for the Julia language. So I ended up contributing like a getting started and like part of a user's manual. And sort of the nice kind of cool thing about Google season of docs is that they do have a per diem, so you end up getting paid a little bit for your time, but it's usually like pretty free flowing, and there's not a lot of structure. You just kind of do. So it's a really good thing to have even on your resume, because excuse me, there is not like a lot of hand holding besides just getting you started with whatever it is you're going to be working on. For me, it was mostly just trying to find something different to do during quarantine 2020, and just meeting some new people. And then another way to build your portfolio is contributing your time to like nonprofit organizations. For example, Technical Writers Without Borders. I do know that I believe they still have a LinkedIn group where you can join, and I mean, I'm sure they have websites and stuff like that. Especially in 2020, and I believe there's still some need now. especially with COVID, there was a need for writers to be able to write just a mass amount of documentation, from brochures to like presentations and things like that. So that was another sort of thing that I helped out with. There was a group of people in UK who needed COVID-19 related content produced and published so that they can distribute it to like local homeless shelters, universities, things like that. So content like this can easily go on your portfolio. But when all else fails, find something that you're passionate about and write about it. Like Sara was saying, put it up on GitHub. And for example, like you might be a master chef, build out your recipes, tell people how to create them. So even if it's something as simple as that, people can see it, and it can give some background to how you write, to what the flow is, things like that. So I'm just going to keep pinging on Sara, but just listen to her in that sense, is that just keep on writing and just do it. So I'm going to hand it off to Jacob, and he's going to talk to you guys a little bit more about portfolio and LinkedIn.
Thanks, Samantha. Hey, y'all. So I just want to echo what my previous panelists have said about portfolio pieces not having to be for a job, class, or internship. It can absolutely be something that you're passionate about, something you volunteer for. So I do want to share a story to communicate this. I was a year out of grad school. I got my master's in lit here. So like Samantha, I don't have a degree in tech comm. I use that portfolio to showcase my tech writing skills, not necessarily the degree. So year out of grad school, working part-time like many people in this gig culture that we're in. And I was blessed enough to land an interview at IBM. The application, and most applications that I sent out, didn't require a portfolio. It was usually just resume, cover letter, that type of standard stuff. So the day of the interview, a couple hours before the interview began, I was emailed asking to send over some portfolio pieces for them to take a look at before they interviewed me. And I had to politely say, I don't have a portfolio, so I don't want any of you all to make my mistake. So on that note, I really encourage you to save yourself some heartache and stress and have at least a couple portfolio pieces, even if it's one, maybe as much as 2 or 3, but even if it's just one, some sort of document that you can send out along with your resume to show your tech writing skills. So that's my advice. Like what Sara said, Sangeeta and Samantha, keep writing, start writing, but definitely have at least one portfolio piece before you start sending out applications. So that's my kind of 2 cents on portfolios. I do want to talk a bit about LinkedIn. I am a huge advocate for LinkedIn, and specifically directly messaging people and connecting with people. So that IBM interview I mentioned about, you might have figured by now I didn't get the job without that portfolio. But I connected with every single person on the interview panel, and all of them accepted. And then I kept in touch with them, and I directly messaged them like, hey, I just took this course. Sara was talking about courses. I just wrote this thing for my church. Samantha was talking about, volunteer work. And most people responded pretty well. They either congratulated me or they gave me advice like, hey, that's great. Why don't you consider doing blank? I got a lot of people like, I just saw this job. Maybe you should apply to it. I wouldn't have seen the job posted on LinkedIn because I'm not as connected to as many people in the tech community. But by reaching out to the few connections I had, I was able to widen that opportunity to see what jobs are out there. And I've even had people, because I connected with them and continued conversations with them, tell me, oh, hey, good for you. So glad to see you're doing well. There's actually a position open on my team. Why don't you apply for it? So I think a lot of us know LinkedIn is great to have, but I think a lot of us don't leverage it in the sense we don't talk as much over LinkedIn. We kind of treat it like Facebook or Instagram. Let me just make a lot of cool posts. But, directly message people. If you're like me, it can be really intimidating. So if you're shy, introverted, don't let that stop you. The more you do it, the more confident you'll be. I'm a big believer in getting people to read my messages. I'll ping my friends or siblings and be like, could you please read this message before I send? Lavanya's laughing. Yeah, I'm sure she's done it too. So yeah, just don't let shyness hold you back. Trust me, I've been very nervous before I've directly messaged everyone. and it's usually turned out very well for me. So on that note, Lavanya is going to talk a lot about making a super great LinkedIn profile. So I'll hand it to you, Lavanya.
Thank you, Jacob. Delighted to be here with you guys this Saturday morning. The focus of my short talk today is how to make your digital presence shine. And by that, I mean your LinkedIn profile. Now, many folks think that if they have an up-to-date resume, that's the strong resume, that's pretty good for applying to jobs. That's only half the story. What happens is that when you apply for a job with a resume, you upload it on the portal at the organization's website or something, and that resume lands on the recruiter's desk, there's a very good chance they want to go look at your LinkedIn profile. And if it's not there, then it's like, okay, not there. Now, when they pass it on to the manager who does the hiring, and he or she looks at the resume, again, there's a very good chance they're going to go online and try to look up and see what your LinkedIn profile says about you. And if it's not there, or if it's incomplete, then it's a slightly disappointing experience. So I strongly encourage you to put some energy in making your LinkedIn profile solid and communicate who you are and what you want to do. So I want to share a few things with you about how to make your profile much stronger. The majority of the people seem to believe that if they just add information about their education and their work experience and their internships, and then just put their name there, that's sufficient. Well, that's like the very minimal part of LinkedIn. The first thing you want to do to improve your profile is add a picture. Now, this is not just any picture. This has to look professional. So ask a family member or a friend to take a nice picture of you, hopefully with a smile, and then upload it. So because your picture makes a connection with other people. Now, right below your picture, there's what's known as a headline. Many people don't fill that. The headline can say something about what you're looking for, or it's a one sentence summary of who you are. Look at other profiles and see people who have headlines, and then you'll get an idea about what your headline should say about you or what you want. Now, below the headline is a section called About. This is where you summarize your work experience or what you've done as part of your education, any co-ops or internships you've done. It's like a short summary. So think about it this way. If you got on an elevator with someone and they say, what do you do? And you had to give a pitch, like a 2-minute pitch about who you are and what you do. That's what that summary should be. It should summarize who you are and what you're looking for. Now, all of us actually list out our work experiences and then education. There's a couple more ways to make your profile stand out. LinkedIn has a way of allowing you to request recommendations from your professors or people under whom you've done internships or past employers. Now, assuming you have a good relationship and they respect you and so forth, ask them, would you be willing to write a short recommendation for me on LinkedIn? When they say yes, then you go to LinkedIn and you initiate that request. And the assumption here is that they are on LinkedIn, right? So they also need to have a LinkedIn profile. So you send this request via LinkedIn, they receive your request, and then all they have to do is put 3 to 5 sentences about you or your work or what they think about you. Now, what happens is when you have, say, 3 to 4 people who have added recommendations to your profile, just think about it. When your resume lands on the recruiter's desk, believe me, recruiters spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So the first thing they're going to do is go look at your LinkedIn, and boom, they go to the bottom of your profile and they look at these recommendations. Right then and there, you are a comprehensive candidate. Your totality of your profile is awesome. So your chances of then moving from the recruiter to the manager's desk the chances really go up. So these are just a few things that most people actually don't do. So if you did this, that would really make your digital presence shine. Now, if you want to take your LinkedIn profile to a higher level, you could write blogs, make 4 to 6 paragraph blogs about a topic that interests you, that you want to share in a professional environment, and add that blog to your LinkedIn profile. So these are a few things. And of course, you should connect with other folks on LinkedIn. And once you connect, then you can ask them, advice or questions, just like Jacob has pointed out. So I hope this has been helpful to you. And now I pass you on to Julie.
Thanks, Lavanya. I just want to follow up with what Lavanya was saying about LinkedIn, because it's a nice segue into what I want to talk about, which is a little bit more about resumes and getting jobs. LinkedIn is your online resume. So if you fill in, I try to have my resume and my LinkedIn profile synced up pretty tightly. Recruiters can and will find you on there. So the more information you can put in about yourself, the better your chances are of sort of popping up in there as they go through and search. And mine LinkedIn looking for candidates. I regularly get contacted out of the blue by recruiters for jobs because of my LinkedIn. Excuse me. One really great resource I want to share with you guys is the Ask a Manager blog. I've been reading it for about 2 years now, and even though I've been in the industry for longer than I care to admit, I've still learned things from there. She's got really great linked sections for things like cover letters and resumes. So if you go in and look under topics and you're getting ready, should I write a thank you note? She's got a whole, section of blogs or posts that are tagged with that. People write in and ask her questions, and she gives back answers. And there's a lot of really useful information in there, especially about, hey, I heard this weird resume tip. Is it a good idea? Things like, should I use hot pink paper and weird fonts? No. So if you've heard some strange tip, it's a good idea to go in and check and see what she has to say. One of her best resume tips, and I'm not going to share a whole lot of resume tips because there's an awful lot of advice out there. But just if you think of one thing, a resume is not just a list of your duties, but it's a list of your accomplishments. And think about how to explain what you've accomplished in your jobs. And even if it's not a tech writing job, you're trying to give some idea of the scope of your duties and how hard you worked. If you are second in a class of 15, that's not a big deal. But if you are second in your class and there's 300 kids in your high school, that's gives some idea of where you rank. So you weren't just a waitress, you were a waitress at the most popular restaurant in town that served 300 meals every night. Try and figure out some way to get numbers in there, to give some idea that the scope of your accomplishments. And the next thing I want to talk about is interviewing. Once you get into interviewing, it's when you're early on in your career, oftentimes you think like, if I get an interview, I have to accept the job. And I know you're going to feel especially pressured about this right now because you've probably got student loans, but this may be advice you can tap into later in your career. But I also want you to think about interviewing is a two-way street. Much like dating, you don't have to accept every man that asks you out, or every woman that asks you out, whatever your gender preference is. You get to say no. You get to think about, is this a good match for me? And you will be more successful in interviewing just as you are in dating if you have a better idea of what you're looking for. So spend a little bit of time thinking about, where you are going to feel like you fit in and what's going to match your needs and desires. Do you want to be in a big company where you can be sort of anonymous and there's lots of processes in place and you can come in and other people will be there to teach you? Or do you think you'd be, happier at a smaller place where you can really stand out and innovate and do your own thing and make your mark and figure stuff out for yourself? Do you want to have a lot of guidance? Do you want to just do your own thing? Do you want to be creative? What's going to basically think about what you think is going to make you happy and what's going to set you up for success. If you are, a huge introvert and you are working somewhere where there's open offices and you're seated right next to the sales department and there's lots of chatter, that might not be the best place for you. And really think about, do I need quiet to work? Do I need to work with other people, and collaboration is what works for me? The more you can think about those things and figure them out, the better chances you have as you go into interviews to sort of filter out where you think you're going to be successful. And that's really what this is all about. We want you to be successful. We want you to be happy in your job because you're going to be at work 40, 50 plus hours a week. There is no right answer. It's just whatever is right for you. So spend some time thinking about that. Know yourself, know what's going to work for you. And then once you get into the interview process, give some thought about benefits. This is another thing people don't always talk about in careers. Benefits are things that are going to affect your wallet. There are things like health insurance, tuition reimbursement, 401k match. And I'm just going to say this, if you have a 401k match, put money in. That is free money you're giving away if you do not take advantage of that. You may disagree with me about this, but a lot of companies promote things like free snacks and free beer and bringing your dog to work. I don't consider those to be benefits. Those are ways that they're trying to encourage you to spend longer at the office because they're hoping that you will spend more time working at the office. And one of the things that is going to be a reality, we're in the technology industry, chances are at some point in your career, you're going to lose your job. You might work for a startup that fails. One of my very good friends worked for 6 failed startups in a row. You might be working for a larger company when there's an economic downturn or something like we're going through right now with the pandemic lays people off. And getting laid off or losing your job sucks. That's the truth. But losing a job and losing all of your friends, if your entire social circle is at work, just makes it even worse. So at the end of the day, shut down your computer, leave the office. If they're having a Friday night, social, you don't have to socialize with your coworkers. You can if you want to, but I strongly suggest that you go home, hang out with your roommates, with your spouse, your significant other, spend time with your family, have some friends outside of work, because that is so necessary as you move from job to job. So set some boundaries around your time. And I'm going to leave you here with a great quote that I just came across the other day from Roxane Gay in the New York Times. The job will never love you. Do not invest the whole of your identity in what you do for a living, because when the job refuses to love you back, when it lets you down, you're left with nothing, and you deserve much better. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dana.
Thank you, Julie. That was excellent. Hello, my name is Dana Brown, and it's really a privilege to be here and speak with you all today. I really wanted to be here because I had a number of challenges in my job searches in the past. So I'd like to share a personal story with you. In 2017, I decided to make a leap from marketing and event planning to a truly technical professional. I wanted to write code. So I started an online coding course called the Odin Project to see if web development would be a good fit for me, because I was always kind of fascinated by it. So in fall of 2017, I enrolled in a local web development boot camp. And upon the completion of the course, which was like drinking from a fire hose, they said it would take 2 to 4 months to land that first internship or junior web development job. So I followed their advice and I sent out 8 to 10 resumes per week. Now these were qualified resumes. I would customize each one, make sure it sounded like a job that was a good fit. And then I also spent a great deal of time reading about the industry, creating my personal website, pushing projects to GitHub. You've probably heard about GitHub a lot. It actually took 8 months and no less than 100 resumes before I got my first internship. This was a contract job that was quite challenging since there was no senior developer to help me out. It was just me. So I had to figure things out on my own. It paid less than minimum wage. Still, I knew it was an experience that would help move me forward. When that opportunity ended a little earlier than I thought it might, it took me months again to find my next gig. I want to say like 72 resumes. And that was a contract at IBM. But it wasn't a web development job, it was more of a project management job. And I was like, should I take this? I took it and I loved it. And just by accident, it was the Red Hat marketplace. So it was a brand new venture. And so I started documenting the onboarding process for the ISVs. I was helping them to onboard onto the website. And so I would just document it in my spare time. My colleagues kept talking about the documentation and liking it. And I was like, well, okay. And so when my contract came to an end, I thought, why haven't I considered technical writing? I do have a journalism degree. It's kind of a blend of two things I love. So I guess that my message to you is, if your job hunt takes longer than you expect, stick with it. With perseverance, you will reach your goals. And when you interview and you receive a no, please see that no as a stepping stone to a yes. There may be several no's, but at the end of that path, there is a yes. And keep the no's at arm's length. I think this is really important, because you have to know that the no is not a personal rejection of you. My husband was interviewing, and it was a job he really, really wanted. And he got really far in the interview, and then he got some information you don't always get, but he found out actually the person they hired had already worked there before and knew everybody. So it wasn't that there was something lacking in him. This person just had a stronger connection and was already working there in the past. So they knew they were a good culture fit. So please keep those no's at arm's lengths. Last September, I reached my goal to land a full-time technical role at a respected company with growth potential. And it took me about 4 years. So know that your ideal job might not be the first one that you get, but keep going, you will get there. And I'm just going to close out saying there's a number of studies. One I read really recently on LinkedIn that have shown that perseverance is the #1 characteristic of people. Demographic, it's not the most intelligent or creative person. They are not the wealthiest. People who are the most successful have one thing in common: perseverance. And the great news is that perseverance is a choice. So my message to you is go out into the world and persevere. I wish you the best of luck. And don't forget Red Hat. They hire professionals from all different backgrounds and early professionals, people in many different areas of their career. So best of luck, and thank you for your time.
All right.
I'm sorry, Kevin's next. Sorry.
No problem. So hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Owen. And a lot of what Dana was saying kind of feeds directly into what I wanted to say today. You've gotten a lot of great practical advice about building out your portfolio, making connections, just everything that you need in order to get that resume built up and sent out there and make you look desirable for the market. And that's all fantastic, but that's not the advice I want to give today. So I actually wanted to start with a brief story, which is a quote from Neil Gaiman, who's an author. He's pretty wonderful. But the quote goes, some years ago, I was luckily enough invited to a gathering of great and good people, artists and scientists, writers and discoverers of things. And I felt that at any moment they would realize that I didn't qualify to be there among these people who had really done things. On my second or third night there, I was standing at the back of the hall while a musical entertainment happened, and I started talking to a very nice, polite, elderly gentleman about several things, including our shared first name. And then he pointed to the hall of people and said words to the effect of, I just look at all these people and I think, what the heck am I doing here? They've made amazing things. I just went where I was sent. And I said, yes, but you were the first man on the moon. I think that counts for something. So my point here is that, and that was Neil Armstrong, of course, that Neil Gaiman was talking to. Neil Armstrong felt like he didn't belong in a hall of great discoverers. And I think everybody has a little bit of that feeling like they just don't belong here. Like maybe everyone else around you is more capable, more intelligent, knows what they're doing, but you don't. Like everyone else knows what's going on, but I have no clue. And I think it's worth knowing that everybody feels that. I mean, one of the greatest authors in America, Maya Angelou, wrote 11 books, won numerous awards. She never felt like she deserved them. So this is something that we see very often all the time. It's just the feeling that you're not quite where you want to be, or you're just not good enough, or everyone around you is better, smarter, more capable. And it's not true. Every one of us is very, very capable. We're good at what we do. And this, of course, leads to a lot of nervousness and feeling like the task ahead of you is daunting. It's going to be difficult. And the reality is, yes, it will be. It's going to be difficult. You're going to be nervous. You're going to make mistakes. All of that is okay. There's nothing wrong with making a mistake. Just embrace the fact that you've made a mistake and you have something to learn now. That's all a mistake really is. It's an opportunity to learn something. So it's kind of a change in outlook. So like Dana was saying, if you send out 100 resumes and you don't get any back, don't take that as a personal failing. Maybe there's something that you could learn, maybe something that you could be doing, but it's not necessarily that you are a failure or that you are not appealing. Just look at it a little bit differently. Try to take something away from that experience. When you finally get the job, you're going to feel overwhelmed. It's going to be difficult. You're going, especially the first few months, it's going to be very hard. You're in an entirely new environment. It's okay to make mistakes. It is okay to not know exactly what's going on or what you are doing. Trust me, I have been working at Red Hat for 3 years. I have no clue what I'm doing, but other people seem to think that I'm pretty good at it. So, and like, you know, just right before this SpeedCon panel, I was kind of panicking a little, like, oh, what am I going to say? Like, I had some ideas, but I'm presenting to you now, and I'm trying not to let that stop me. I don't let that feeling of being nervous, of being shy, of feeling like I'm going to make a mistake, that doesn't stop me. So I've embraced the fact that, yes, I'm going to be imperfect, and you're going to be imperfect too, and that is perfectly all right. And that is all that I have for you. That's the most important piece of advice I can think of. So thank you, everyone.
All right, well, that concludes our round robin of advice and our experiences. But of course, we would love to hear questions from y'all. So whether it's in the chat or off mute, please let us know.
I have a question about the LinkedIn headlines. So as someone who's a student at the moment, I've never known whether I should put in my headline like technical writer, because I'm not sure how much experience you have to put that in there, because I don't want to misrepresent myself, but I also like want to like show people like, oh, this is where I'm headed. So I was just wondering what you had to say about that.
Jacob, you want to take that?
No, I was just about to say, Lavanya, please take
Okay.
it, because I don't have a good headline. So I want to hear this just as much as you do, Brooke. So please, Lavanya.
Okay. So one thing I will say, the headline that goes under the profile picture in LinkedIn, if you look at other people's profiles, you'll see that most of the time that headline is there only for people who have spent many years in the industry, because by spending so much time, they've carved a certain kind of persona. And so they take that persona and try to put it in that headline. So in your case, if you are a technical writer or pursuing this path, you should add a little bit more to it than technical writer, right? Is there something unique about you, your work experience, or how you think, or whatever? Brainstorm and put down these things about you and see what is it that you want others to know about you, that you are a tech writer, but can you give a little bit more context to the fact that you're a tech writer, right? Does that kind of answer the question for you? I will say this, at the end of this session, you are going to get a slide deck, I believe, for this presentation that we just gave. Our contact information is there, and you're welcome to reach out to any one of us, and we'd be glad to look at your profile and maybe give some feedback. So we'd have to see what's there to tell you maybe what more you could add to that headline.
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hey, I'd just like to add one more thing onto that, which is that in my case, for the headline, what I used was a very short description of like basically what my philosophy is about writing. So my headline was embrace elegance and simplicity, and that was it. Kept it short and sweet, and that actually seemed to catch some eyes.
Yeah, I want to also just agree with what Kevin said. I also kind of just use like descriptors of like what I'm, what I was good at, which I felt like, I was really good at and excited about learning new things. So, I just sort of created like a one-liner elevator pitch, about like how I was like a curious individual, passionate about writing and learning new things, you know, aspiring to break into professional writing. I've seen some people put things like that, aspiring professional writer. I went ahead and put that I was a writer when I was trying to get into writing, because that's just I decided that I was a writer. So I had writing from, you know, my time in college. I could find lots of things that I'd written and, you know, pick little pieces apart to display. So, you know, I think if you have things that you've written, then you are a writer. So, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I was in my boot camp, they had some of the local recruiting companies come out and speak to us from Robert Half, and they all agreed that you need to say you are a technical writer, present yourself that as that person, because you have to believe it if you want other people to believe it. So stick it in there.
One thing I will add is people who've been in the industry for a very long time, they may not be attached to the title anymore. And so in my case, I am only targeting my profile towards recruiters and employers in cloud technology. I am not interested in any other kind of technology, only cloud. And Red Hat is you know, up there in the cloud technology. So my headline says, enabling the move to the cloud. Now, only someone who's in the cloud technology would understand this, because I enable old IT environments to move into the cloud. The documentation that I write helps them move. So if you're part of the technology, you would understand what I'm saying. So but I'm not telling you need to do that, but what Dana said is right. Make sure technical writer is there and add something more to it. Aspiring technical writer, as Sara said, or whatever, a little bit more, add some, jazz it up.
Something that I was doing when I was like looking for new opportunities or like in between contracts or something like that, I would say something like currently, you know, like a current or something like currently as a technical or currently working as a technical writer looking for new opportunities, something like that. So I actually dropped in the chat that, you know, if you're a student, you can use something like currently a student looking for tech writing opportunities, something like that. So
that's excellent, Samantha. Yeah.
Yeah, so letting the recruiters know that you are open for opportunities also helps. So they know that you are looking out, because sometimes people already have a job and they're not looking out for. So it's like a waste of time for the recruiters. So letting them know that you're open for opportunities also helps. So as Samantha said, if you're a student, you could say passed out and looking out for tech writing related opportunities. It's easier for the recruiter also to choose and pick resumes then, because it's already out there on your title.
Right. And Sangeeta, adding to that, there's a switch that you flip on in LinkedIn that says
on and
enable
off,
other
yes.
recruiters to see that you're seeking a job. You flip that switch on, and when recruiters spend time in LinkedIn, your profile might come up in front of them. So that's
right.
That's awesome.
Could I break in with the question, if that's all right?
Yes, please.
Thanks for the panel. I really appreciate it. I wanted to go back to some of the early advice in the panel about assembling a portfolio of work to send out. Because as I'm sure all of you know, some of the best kinds of portfolio materials are things that show you writing, for instance, documentation, or the kinds of writing that you would expect to do. But documentation projects, of course, are can be enormous, and they can involve lots of writers working on the project collaboratively. So in the case where a student might have worked on a relevant, and that they handle collaborative pieces in a portfolio of materials.
So
sorry, if you could repeat that last part of your question, it was cutting in and out.
Sure. So my question was on if a student has a relevant piece of writing from a class that was done collaboratively, how would you recommend that they handle collaborative pieces that are very relevant, but handling those inside of a portfolio?
Yeah, so I'll start with this, but I'd love to get my panelists' opinion as well, because I think we've all been there. So a couple of answers to this. What we all said is we've all been kind of touching on the collaborative nature of tech writing. So thank you, Jason, for kind of labeling it as such. So I don't think there's any issue with putting a collaborative piece, because that's what you're going to have to do as a tech writer. So it can actually be a good piece to showcase with how you can work well with others. You can produce a good product with others. I'm a big believer, and I know this can be tedious because it's just one more document to throw on top of tons of documents, but a cover letter for the portfolio. So that is separate than the cover letter that you tend to pair with your resume in an application. I always, in my portfolio, if I upload it as a zip file or share it as a Google Doc, there's always a clearly titled portfolio cover letter. And then in that cover letter, I explain why I chose each piece and maybe a bit about that piece's purpose. So you can call out, this is a collaborative piece. I worked with my professor, Dr. Schwartz, on it, and I'm showcasing it to show how I can take feedback, or I can work well with people maybe much more advanced in their careers. This goes back to what, you know, Kevin was talking about like you might face like imposter syndrome, but you can be like, hey, I'm a student, I work well with a tenured professor, so you throw me in with a principal tech writer or, you know, a distinguished engineer, I can work well with them, it's not going to hold me back. You know, you can explain that inside that cover letter. So that's kind of my 2 cents of it. Absolutely include a collaborative piece, and you leverage a cover letter to explain why you're including it.
The sort of my take on that would be, I definitely agree with what Jacob said. If you have the opportunity to include a cover letter, because sometimes like some applications might not have room for that. The other thing might be if you're using like bullet points, if you're just having to like put in links, if there's a space for like a comment or something like that, I would just say like actually when I was applying to Red Hat, one of my work examples was a collaborative piece that I worked on with a few of the other folks, and I put in there like worked with a couple of other writers, but you know, if you have like a specific section that you wrote, you can highlight that. And if it's like a big doc and you know, like let's say you wrote like an understanding section or like a terminology section or something like that, you can highlight those specific ones and just say specifically I worked on the following, and then just, you know, put something like that. But I've used, actually, I would probably say like 50% of the ones that I've used have all been collaborative, mostly because a lot of the things that I've worked on, big products, I personally wouldn't be the only one that could document it anyway. So I've always just highlighted like, here are the sections that I've worked on, so.
Yeah, I want to say too, just to emphasize what Samantha was sort of saying is like, I always strongly don't like discourage anyone putting like an entire user's guide. Like even if I've been in a position where I was like a lone technical writer and I've written like an entire user guide, but I would never put that entire user's guide even though I'm technically responsible for all of it. It's much better to bite size your portfolio pieces and really break them down, highlighting your collaboration skills, your research skills, who your audience, your awareness of your audience, is it a procedural, is it conceptual, you know, what kind of information you're writing and how you got there, who you worked with. So yeah, even if you have a whole piece, don't put it the whole thing, I would say.
So I'm going to piggyback on Samantha and Sarah's and say that, you know, you always pick a piece which is your best created piece, because that's your selling point, and you highlight that piece. And as they said, you know, add why you feel it's your best piece and what was it that, you know, how did you collaborate or create that piece, what curiosity and what audience research, you know, everything good about it. And even if you can't put that in your cover letter, you can always bring it up during the interview discussion later on. I mean, if your cover letter sort of starts becoming too big, so you can just add those points. And of course, you know, as Sarah said, sometimes, you know, you collaboratively write a whole manual, so you can't give a link to the whole manual, but to those sections. So always give that, helps.
Jason, I'd just like to add on one item to your question. That is, some companies, and this includes Red Hat, they will actually make you go through a writing test. I went through one, and I'm sure all my colleagues here did. So they're not so much worried about the you know, the pieces that you submit as much as the fact that, hey, can you pass our writing test? So something for you to know.
Awesome. Is there another question?
I have a quick question. I was wondering, you mentioned the writing test, and I know a lot of other companies do writing tests as well. Can you kind of allude to some of the types of writing tests that will be given, possibly?
Okay, so I did my writing test a couple of years ago, but Samantha or Sarah, y'all might have done it recently. You want to talk about it? Or
They
Kevin?
actually didn't do it for us. I think like they got some feedback that people were really stressed out in the pandemic because of it or something. So we didn't have to do it. Lucky us.
Okay.
I was a contract to, I'm sorry, I was a contract to, like, I converted my contract, got turned into full-time, so I actually didn't end up doing a writing test either.
I did.
I did.
Yeah. I did one.
Olivia, I did one in September, so I remember it pretty well. I actually did not submit any technical writing, even though I had done some technical writing on the IBM side as a contract job. You know, it's all like proprietary, and I just didn't. They didn't even really ask. So I had a project. I was given like 3 or 4 days to complete it. I had like my initial phone screen, then I had this tech writing project, and basically they provided some existing content and asked me to improve it. And so I did that. There was some questions about what kind of things you would include in your technical writing, sort of things that kind of stood out as maybe a little unusual. And I said, I would keep it very professional and straightforward. But yeah, I didn't find it to be overwhelming or extremely intimidating. And you did have several days to complete it. So yeah, it was not nearly as hard as the coding whiteboarding. That's anxiety. That's anxiety.
It totally depends on the company. Sometimes they'll give you just a wall of text and ask you to break it up and like pull out the procedural stuff and put it in a numbered list, that sort of thing. Because I've done this at various companies. So
yeah. I would say the writing test, from what I recall, was very reasonable. Something had to be a prerequisite before you started a procedure. So that prerequisite was hidden in the content. So unless you did that, you couldn't do it, right? So if you had to rewrite it, you would put the prerequisite at the top and then start your procedure. So something like that. It was very reasonable that any tech writer would be able to do. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So sometimes some companies give you grammar tests. So you have like multiple choice questions wherein you can choose the right grammar. Some companies give you a procedure. So they'll give you like, if you want to send an SMS, write a procedure for that. So that's like you write the entire information from scratch on your own. Some companies, as others have said, they'll give you a block of text, just text. And now you have to separate what's a concept, what's a procedure, what's a task, what would be the steps. So some companies like Red Hat, it does give you like 1 or 2 days for the test that I did, but some companies, they just give you 2 hours. You've got to finish the test in 2 hours. So the deck that we have provided, we have given some links to the grammar tests that usually are required to clear the basic grammar test, which includes articles and maybe some modifiers, prepositions. So that sort of grammar test, rephrasing the sentences, minimalism, like, they'll try to test your minimalism skills without actually speaking about it. Yeah. So generally a mix of grammar, the way you will actually go about writing procedures or create actual block of text. And sometimes I've also attended interviews in some companies that give you analytics, like, you have to do some logical thinking and solving some puzzles. So they do that as well. So usually for the beginner level, when you're getting into the new job, that's the skill that they would analyze. How would you analytically or logically solve this problem? So that's also one of the tests that I've seen. So that's from me.
Yeah, we have about 1 minute left. So I want to draw your guys' attention to Kevin's comment, because he was talking about rewriting documentation. Maybe you can speak about that in a sec, Kevin. So sometimes it's more editing than making content. Thank you, Ingrid, as a writing coach at Red Hat that reviews these writing tests. She gave some good advice inside the chat, to please look at that.